Welcome back in, everybody. It's another edition of the First and Orange podcast, Friday morning edition, preview edition. Potentially, Parker sounds like he has a cold because he does edition, but it's a big one on deck. We don't stop for, stuffed up nose or anything like that. Horrible sounding audio because it's Chargers, right, Luca?
You've got a new little man there. You're gonna be sick in one form or another, like half the time going. So
once he actually starts daycare,
yeah,
you'll just have to. I'll be like a leopard. You'll just have to stay minimum 20 feet away from me at all times.
Right. Yeah. Hazmat suit.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. N95s in the media workroom. Just added layer of protection. No, I mean it's a beautiful day here. I'm imagining gonna be okay. September in Los Angeles from the expert Luca. What can we expect?
It's warm. It's always warm.
Yeah.
It's never not warm. It's usually sunny except for the smog in the clouds, and so that's my weather forecast.
As a recent before we dive into this, as a relatively recent mover from Los Angeles to Denver, time to ask you, has the Colorado weather lived up to its reputation?
Big time. I honestly, I think the only factor influencing the climate comparison for me is the beaches for LA, because it's a different, it all ties together. But the Colorado weather, I haven't experienced winter yet. I don't know if I'm a snow guy or not. So that's but the summer in Colorado, I'll put up against pretty much anywhere.
Yep, so, there you go. Well, winter's not that bad. First time you get 20 inches of snow, you'll be like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
No snow this weekend, just a big old divisional matchup between Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. Round 3, Harbaugh 2-0 last year. Sean Payton pines for the Brandon Staley days of 2023 when Denver swept the Chargers. But this is interestingly, this obviously is Denver's first divisional game of the year. It's the Chargers' third. They're 2-0 and they've already beat the Chiefs and the Raiders. I don't know that I've ever actually seen a team.
No, it's so weird
through the division. It's very weird, but they're off to a great start, obviously.
Yeah, I was talking to my buddy who's a Chargers fan yesterday, and I was like, and I realized it in our conversation. I was like, that's so weird that that's crazy. And if they get out to a 3-0 start on the year in the division, you're gonna have a long, long way to make up the rest of the year. So I think. I was just talking with Troy Rank, our columnist, but it feels like an early inflection point on the year. It's there's on one hand, you could be 2-1, should be 3-0, and you have, there's been a lot of issues through, a few weeks, but you're on the right side, and you're improving. And on the other hand, you're 1-2, and all of a sudden 3 games back of the division, and your record. Your record indicates the problems that have occurred. So it's 2 very different outcomes await.
It's interesting because after the loss to the Colts, one of the things that a lot of people said is very fair. Early in the season, there's 15 games left. It's not the end of the world. It's bad loss. Don't get me wrong. We've written extensively about just the multitude of ways in which it was a massive failure on the Broncos' part. But it's also week 2. There's a long way to go. Everybody's still in it. It doesn't matter if you're 2-0, 0-2, whatever. I'm not sure if you saw the now I'm going to blank on his name. This is not going to make for very good podcasting. But the Packers safety said there's a lot of MFers that are 2-0, and at the end of the year,
oh yeah, saw that clip.
They don't amount to anything. Is the PG-13 way of saying what he said, and so that's true. That's true. There's so much season left. And yet at the same time, the loss last week makes this one feel more pertinent. If it was 2-0 versus 2-0, obviously you'd have, still divisional game, key game feel, but you wouldn't be thinking about the Chargers trying to run away from everybody else in the division already. And so that's part of it. And there's some merit to that. Some of it's probably a little bit overblown for week 3, but I do think one of the things that we said from May when the schedule came out, Luca, is just that this opening stanza is tough. And I think Indy's better than I thought they were going to be. The Bengals game looks different since it's going to be Jake Browning instead of Joe Burrow. So if you call those things a wash, like I just have sort of said all along that 4-2 through the first 6 weeks, like coming back from London 4-2 would be a heck of an accomplishment, given that you play just straight out that you play the Chargers and the Eagles on the road. Obviously, you've got a road loss besides those two now. So I don't honestly I think if they come back from London 3-3, it's not the end of the world. They'll be in the mix. It's not ideal, obviously. But yeah, I mean, if you get this one and you get to 2-1, then you start talking about, okay, you're right in the mix from the jump.
Yeah, the back half that there's, I mean, the season's just really tough in, at the start and at the end. Like the back half of the schedule is, at Washington and, Chiefs on Christmas Day and obviously Chargers again and whatnot. There's, and there's that little kind of cushion in the middle stretch of the year. So yeah, I agree with you. It's the last time I'll make this joke. You could say that they don't have a lot of leverage going into week 3. So
yeah,
you could say that.
Totally on you, Luca.
You could say that. I know. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of, to me, there's a narrower window than I feel like the Broncos would like to win this game, given sort of the Chargers have just operated a lot more cleanly, I think, through the first couple weeks of the year. Like their pass game's clicking on all cylinders. They're really good against the blitz. They just swarmed Geno Smith last week. Like, they're operating at a really high level. And so I think there's a set of a few factors that need to go really right for the Broncos to win this game, in my mind. And I think one of them, I know we'll get to it. I'm doing a story on him this Sunday. So, keep an eye out for that. A lot of good info on how this whole thing went down. But JK Dobbins, you could call it a revenge game. You can call it, but he's a chip on his shoulder constantly. Definitely. Like that's the thing. Like you talk to the guys in the locker room, they're like, one of the best things he's brought to this team is just an edge. Like, that just the sheer personality of this offense didn't really have. And all of a sudden you have this 5'10", veteran back going up to Malcolm Roach and talking crap in training camp and, this or that. And the guys love it. He carries that around with him. You'd have to imagine there's a little bit more fuel to the fire going against the Chargers, who kind of dangled him around in free agency a little bit, just, and I think the way, like realistically, the way for the Broncos to win this game, like he was the opener and closer in week 2. And I think, Chargers go light box a lot of the time. Like realistically, if they get their ground game working, that opens a lot of things up.
Yeah, the thing that was so interesting about the game that the Broncos lost their week 16 in December last year was exactly that. I mean, that was the Broncos ran the Chargers out of what they like to do defensively early in the game. They just, they pounded the football. First drive, 4 different running backs carried the ball. It was like a Sean Payton, if you take all the openers that he does and all the different things he likes to do, it's like he took that and he just mashed it all into the run, basically. And they had all these different looks, and it was Marvin Mims, and it was Blake Watson, and it was Jaleel, and it was like all these different looks. And they scored touchdowns, I think, like 3 of their first 4 drives. It was 21-10. And they just completely got away from it. And Mike McGlinchey was like double fisting, like celebrating. He was like beside himself. He was so happy in the end zone after the second drive, because it was like finally they were doing this thing where they were just like running it down somebody's throat and dominating a game, and they got away from it and they lost in the second half, had to clinch a playoff spot then 2 weeks later against the Chiefs. So the zombie Chiefs. So, that to me, it's like, it's one of the oldest cliches in the book, right? Starts with offense, winning football starts with running the football. But against the Chargers, it's really true because of exactly what you said. They are good enough against the run, typically, where they can stay in their shell. They play a lot of too high. Jesse Minter is really good at making you dink and dunk down the field, and yet they're good enough against the run that they don't have to like deploy extra in the box. And so if the Broncos can make them think twice about that, that's really, to me, like that opens up the rest. And so that's the challenge. We've seen it in flashes. They did not do it the first game last year. They did do it the second game last year. They ended up losing both times, just in different factors. And then the other thing that I think is interesting about this matchup, Luca, is that the Chargers are like this giant, rugged team. And they don't run the ball, really. 90 yards in week 1 against Kansas City, 81 last
3.4 yards a carry so far. It's not really working.
Right, exactly. And yet they have Omarion Hampton, who a lot of Broncos country was clamoring for in the first round, and Najee Harris. Those two guys instead of, obviously, they had JK Dobbins last year. And it's still sort of been the Herbert show. Now, Herbert's been really good so far this season. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they are, when you watch them, you're like, man, this team's going to run it 38 times. And then instead they run it 17 times or something like that.
Yeah. Our old standard on the beat, Jeff Legwold, ESPN, pointed out, I think he asked Sean the other day about, he asked VJ about just Chargers have so many of these like heavy personnel looks, and then they just spin out of it and go play action. And you're like, and VJ was like, he affirmed like it's unique really of a lot of teams in the NFL, and Chargers have been so good in play action so far this year. And, they just have so many different like wrinkles offensively. And they've been, another huge factor this week is they've been incredibly good against the blitz. Like that was an emphasis for them this offseason. Denver did not win, and I know we talked about, obviously it looks different for them when blitzing and the numbers get skewed a bit, but they did not win in the blitz against Daniel Jones and the Colts last week. And if they're not consistently winning one-on-one matchups, this gets a lot tougher because, the Chargers have so many like Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen just can get open underneath really easily. Their O-line has been really good, just held off Max Crosby and the Raiders. So, Justin Herbert was talking about like if you have those two pieces, the protections and the guys to get open against the blitz, it's tough to beat. So that's tough task, big game for Vance Joseph.
Definitely. It's interesting because the Broncos sacked Herbert 5 times last year over 2 games. And I think some of that is that play action invariably at times leads to the longer drop backs, a little bit longer time to throw. The thing about Daniel Jones that Zach Allen was very complimentary of last week was just, he said he never double patted the ball. It was a lot of drop back stuff, hit the mark, throw the ball, get it out of your hands, all of that. That's obviously the way to stunt a pass rush. The problem for the Broncos last week was not only did he get the ball out of his hands quickly, but they created 4 plays of 40-plus yards. So that obviously is a bad combination. It's going to be interesting to see. The Broncos, the pass rush, and Zach Allen said this too on Monday, and I tend to believe him. I don't think there's a lot of reason to doubt the pass rush. Like they have a pretty full resume at this point. And so you have to think that at some point they're going to look. And then also Next Gen Stats was thought that they generated a lot of pressure, which I thought was interesting. It didn't really match the idea.
Feel like it. Yeah. Second half, it felt like they were starting to get home.
Yeah.
Because the second, I don't know his exact number, second half yards, but I think Daniel Jones finished with 316.
Yeah.
Something like that. And he ended the first half like 230 something.
Yeah.
And you saw in the second half, like the accuracy started to get off a little bit sometimes when, Benito was getting home a little bit more consistently. Like things were starting to get in motion there. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The thing about the Chargers is they've played really well up front, despite the fact that they lost Rashawn Slater during training camp. Pretty nice when you can just flip Joe Alt over to left tackle and still have an upper echelon player protecting Herbert's blindside there. And then obviously Herbert, like Bo Nix, fellow Oregon grad, just can help you avoid sacks too because he's so big and he's obviously mobile and he's a good runner and all of that. So yeah, he's playing at a high level. It's a pretty fascinating matchup. I think before, like, one note about Nick Benito probably worth mentioning. Next Gen Stats has him for 15 pressures already this year.
Yeah, leading the league.
Leading the league, 15 pressures, which is as many or more as 3 teams.
That's crazy.
I think Chicago's got 15. Carolina has 14. There's somebody out there that has 13. I don't remember who it is. So it's
only one sack. So it's that's interesting. I'll also point out, you mentioned obviously they moved Joe out over to left tackle. Their right tackle Trey Pipkins, no pressures allowed last week against the Raiders, and that's against Crosby. So they're stout there. Like it's going to be it's a tough test for just sheer kind of one-on-ones for Benito, for Jonathan Cooper. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about that side of the ball, because obviously last week it was a bad week overall.
Yeah, we got to talk about the linebackers.
Yeah, for Alex Singleton and Justin Sternad.
Yeah.
Alex Singleton, by the way, 1 year anniversary of the knee injury this week. That was week 3 last year, and also a homecoming for him. So he'll be juiced up, and especially I don't think it's a secret that those guys didn't play well. Obviously, it was pretty clear, and so then this week, there's no sign that Dre Greenlaw is going to play. We'll get the final verdict on that this afternoon, but he hasn't practiced.
Highly doubtful.
Yeah. So that's where they're at there. And then Sternad back to was limited yesterday. We'll see. I don't know this. A lot of times the progression in that sort of scenario is then you try to get full participation Friday. We'll see about that this afternoon. But they have questions there, I guess, in terms of not only performance the first 2 weeks, particularly last week, also a little bit on the health front. And one of the keys here is if they can figure out a way to play the way they want to play aggressively as they want to play, and not leave those guys exposed in coverage, because that's largely what happened last year. Is Ladd, McConkey just took over in the middle of the field last year, not just against those guys, but against the safeties as well. And so I will be really interested. We saw a little bit last week. We saw 1 snap of Jahdae Barron line up at safety. We've seen a bunch of different nickel and dime variations. I'm curious how Vance deploys the back 2 levels to try to handle this, especially given what we just talked about, where the Chargers haven't run the football all that much so far this year.
To me, this is the week. Said it last week, I thought we'd see more of them, but this is the week where you theoretically really want and need Jahdae Barron. I think, and if again he's a 15 snap kind of gadget guy after this week, I think we come away saying a little bit more, why is this guy necessarily not being used in, because there's, to me, and I'm not a football genius, but optically, so Chargers last year, when targeting the inside linebackers, I think 17 of 17, in the 2 games that they played the Broncos, literally 100% completion rate when going against those guys. Obviously, linebackers are going to get burned in coverage. It happens, but, again, big problem for them, for the Broncos last week. I think, as you mentioned, Ladd McConkey, the Broncos can't afford to put Pat Surtain on, have him kind of shadow or take over like a Tyler Warren, or play on Tyler Conklin, or this or that in this matchup. They need their corners to cover, because Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, Quinn Johnston, there's a stable there. And so you need to do, as you mentioned, you need to deploy the back levels effectively. And I think this is the game where playing a little bit more dime at times, even trying to, as you mentioned, we saw Jahdae Barron in a safety and a snap, deploying him in some creative ways to just, help in coverage. I think this is a game where, to me, it would make sense, and you would want to see him a little bit more. And it's, he's been pretty good, I think, in his time in the first couple of weeks. He had a PBU last week. So to me, if he's not being utilized much in this game, and the Broncos, get burned by proxy or this or that, I think, to me, I'd come away saying, what's not quite going right here? What hasn't accelerated so far?
It's interesting. I talked to Jim Leonard yesterday, the secondary coach and defensive passing game coordinator, and mostly was talking about their safety pair, which they factor in this in a big way too, obviously, because they're going to end up with coverage responsibility in the middle of the field and out of the slot and all of that at times, but also because one of the strengths of those guys is their ability to cover up mistakes. Somebody, breaks out or misses a tackle, and instead of going Jonathan Taylor's super long run notwithstanding, like there's a lot of plays that could go for 20 that go for 7 instead because they cover it up. And obviously you're not, a 7-yard run's not ideal either, but the term Jim Leonard used yesterday was like, sometimes those guys cover up mistakes and then you live to fight another down. You get back on your feet and you don't give up the big one or let somebody get immediately into scoring range or whatever. So I just would be fascinated. I don't know this is going to happen, but given the sort of, what we've laid out about the way the Chargers play versus what their personnel sometimes looks like, I just think it would be interesting if they played more dime, more nickel, more played smaller and lighter and sort of dared the Chargers to say, all right, come running at us. We'll take our chances there. Now that can backfire, obviously. But it's one of those sort of like subplots that I think will be very interesting to sort of watch as this game unfolds.
Yeah. And I mean, as we touched on, like, Chargers have averaged 3.4 yards a carry so far, and that's obviously uncharacteristic for a Jim Harbaugh offense. But, I think Marion Hampton is clearly getting his legs under him. Like, Najee Harris has not been as effective, obviously, in his time in LA so far. So I think you almost play the kind of the Chargers' own game against them a little bit. Like, they are so fond of, like you mentioned, going light in the box, and Denver could realistically do the same thing and say, hey, like, we're going to make Amari and Hampton beat us. And, if that doesn't that gives them a lot more to play with, and a lot more help for guys over the middle of the field in that circumstance and coverage. So, yeah.
Okay, so offensively, you wrote about JK Dobbins. Give us a little feel for kind of where you think Dobbins is at, and just where the Broncos' run game is at in general so far.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's recap, and I get into this in more detail for Sunday. But essentially, going back to free agency, Dobbins really, like, first destination always was Denver, wanted to go to Denver, wanted to be a Bronco. Jonathan Cooper was recruiting him in free agency, played together at Ohio State. Like, JK Dobbins told Jonathan Cooper he wanted to be a Bronco. And I think the plan a little bit was like, obviously the first initial wave of backs kind of goes. And the plan from their standpoint was like, okay, you want a certain price point. You have a lot more flexibility, leverage once things, mini camp, training camp comes and guys get hurt. Like, you're able to anticipate backfield needs, and then you're able to you have more leverage that way. Leverage.
15 yards.
15 yards. The Chargers, right away, free agency, sign Najee Harris, take Amari and Hampton in April. At that point, you think, well, why? No, JK Dobbins is not going back to LA. Like, why would he? Then in late April, Chargers use a tender on him. Pretty rare. Basically means, hey, you gotta find another team by mid-July, or we're gonna pay you essentially a little over $1 million and you have to play for us for a year, exclusive negotiating rights. So that obviously, I think even JK Dobbins said it in June when he first came to Denver. Like, it was a little weird, it's just, and I don't know, maybe the Chargers knew that Denver was in on him. Maybe they just wanted to keep him away from other teams, like this or that. Either way, just optically, externally, strange business, like all things considered, all around. JK Dobbins, again, he wanted to be in Denver. Like, he's, by all indications, locker room really likes him. He really likes being in Denver. And I think, he is a guy like the list of guys who have made it through this league with a full ACL tear, blowing out their knee. He also blew out his knee his senior year in high school. Like the one of the most unique careers you will find, like, of any guy in the league.
And
really.
the ACL, I mean, that was sort of like the Javonte Williams injury, right? I mean, it wasn't just the ACL; it was other stuff.
Yeah, it was. Neil Elatrach, like, surgeon said, he blew out all the ligaments in his knee, essentially. Like, this is no, and he, like, it's just the vision he's had for himself. He was on a certain track, like, before all this happened. Like, he was a guy at Ohio State. He was a guy in Baltimore his first year. And, the hunger through all this has kind of kept him going. And he's always had that sort of edge, that chip to him. It's only grown. And so he's a guy that, like, you will take motivation from certain things. And he told me in the locker room yesterday, like, obviously he always has a chip on his shoulder, but, like, he wants to win this weekend, like that's I think that's plainly obvious. And so I just imagine that, there was one time in high school, like, I don't think I wrote this in a story, but it's high school. There's one game where his high school offensive coordinator said, JK literally came to him at halftime and was like, give me the ball. Like,
Yeah.
He was like, well, yeah, he's like the best player in the state, like, gave it to him. They win the game afterwards. JK gives him a hug and is like, I told you, like, and you're not going to do that in the NFL, but I just have to imagine, like, it's going to be a little bit more juiced up for this one. And he has a chance. Like, I really do think, like, he is the pivot point of this game. Like, if he gets going, everything opens up for Denver. So
it's interesting too, the way that he, just guys that have stories like his, and he's an outlier in just how many injuries and how substantial the injuries have been. But he's not an outlier in the sense that there are a lot of guys who end up at a point in their career, he's only 26, but who at some point end up at a point in their career where maybe they can't physically do the things they did when they first got in the league or when they're at the height of their powers. And yet they sort of find a way to carry on. And that's a compelling human interest story. And it also just speaks to the competitiveness and what it takes to go through something like that and then still be able to function, and not only function, but perform at a relatively high level, and also just be sort of willing, apparently, to do it until your body gives out, And so that's an impressive facet of JK Dobbins' game. And one wrinkle I think that's interesting this week is, Luca, when you watched the sort of the narrative of the offseason and the running game was the outside zone stuff, and it really didn't produce a lot against Tennessee. And then he didn't say exactly what he was talking about, but Sean Payton is not from the outside zone world. He's used it some, but not a lot. And after the first game, he said, we have to take a hard look as a coaching staff about what our plan is in the run game and if what we're doing works. And I thought in that moment, the thought in my head was, oh, he's about to bag the whole outside zone experiment that they spent the whole offseason working on entirely and just go back to inside zone and power and duo and whatever. And then it started to percolate a little bit in week 2, and they got a little play action going off of it and all of that. And they're not going to end up being in the McVay, Shanahan, echelon of this stuff. But I do think that against a team like the Chargers, who they're stout inside, they can play light, to get those guys out, make them move. If you try to push these guys around, it just at some point it's not going to work.
Also, Khalil Mack.
Right, yeah, no Khalil Mack. So
one of the edge run defenders in the league. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it sets up a little bit, and then it fits Bo Nix's game nicely. The boot stuff, the play action, getting on the run, making the run game look the same as the pass game. It all just is sort of it's sort of a compelling storyline to me, because it's not Sean Payton's identity, far from it, and I don't know that it will be this offense's identity at any point given this season, but I do just sort of think that they trended a little more that way in week 2, and I'm fascinated to see if they trend another tick that way in week 3.
Yeah, and I think the pieces sort of all fit together here because, as you mentioned, JK Dobbins, like he knows himself really well, I think, at this point in his career.
Yep.
Like you talk to guys and he's not, you don't see him trying to pop things off the edge very much at all anymore. Like he's, athletically, he's obviously not the same guy he was, but his strength is just balance, tempo, vision. If he sees a lane, like, just the decisiveness, like he's a veteran player. Like that's how Lou Ayeni sees him. That's why the Broncos trust him. Like, he's gonna, it's consistent. And when you look at like his game from that standpoint, theoretically, like the outside zone, I was talking to Frank Crum in the locker room about this, I think Wednesday, but he basically said like Dobbins as a back complements what they're doing as an offensive line really well. Yep. And from that standpoint, it's like not the outside zone. It's not like, let me beat everyone to the outside here. It's like, let me find the lane to cut back, when everyone's shifting. And I think that complements JK Dobbins really well. So I think you started to see that to your point, Parker, a little bit more in week 2. And so I do think that like the how much of Denver's offensive identity and how much Sean Payton is willing to lean into that of like crafting this around Dobbins' strengths, the O-line's, this emphasis towards this right now, like that's going to be really interesting in week 3 and kind of the rest of the year because you see signs of like an identity starting to percolate there.
Yeah, definitely. 32 minutes in, we basically not talked about Bo Nix. So before we go, we'll do that quickly. He played much better in week 2 than week 1. I don't think that was a big surprise necessarily, but it was still, I'm sure, for fans, for coaches, whatever, still a positive sign. 3 touchdown passes. He spread the ball around a lot, obviously, over the first 2 weeks. Troy Franklin has become, I don't want to say the go-to guy, but Troy Franklin's ascension, the Troy Franklin buzz in camp was obviously real and in substance. And so it makes for a good matchup here. Interestingly, Davis Webb, quarterback's coach, obviously last year, told me that the moment he knew for sure on Nix, they got confidence in him the whole time, and obviously all that. But the moment that he knew for sure was the fourth quarter, week 6 against the Chargers last year, which was Sean Payton poo-pooed it as garbage time after the game because it was 20-0 at halftime. I mean, it was a butt kicking. And the Broncos put a bunch of points and yards on the board down the stretch. Payton brushed it off. Davis Webb at the end of the season told me, I watched him play, that he did some stuff that game that not very many people can do. So it's in there. Obviously, structurally, you're going to play different in the first quarter than you are when you're leading by 20 points. But you look good early in the game against them later in the season too. So interested to see, first time he's gone, second year around on division opponents, which they obviously are going to know better even than your standard week-to-week opponent. So interesting chess match with Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and then with Jesse Minter and the Chargers defense.
Yeah, and they obviously have a safety in Derwin James who kind of does everything, and they go, as we talked about, they go, I think they've taken the third most snaps in dime of any team in the league this year. Like, they have versatile pieces in the secondary and they'll load it up and this or that. So that becomes a question of for how you attack it for Bo Nix. And I think through these first couple of weeks, like starting to see this conversation, which is always a conversation, but of, hey, I've got this really good defense. Do I play more conservatively, play more calculated to avoid putting them in bad positions because they're so good? Or do I take more, or do I be more aggressive because they can bail me out sometimes? And I think in week 1, you saw the latter and the defense bailed him out. Week 2, Bo Nix throws a fourth quarter pick. Obviously he played great throughout the game, but fourth quarter pick and defense couldn't, theoretically. So that'll be interesting. This game, I think theoretically, like the ideal balance for Bo Nix here is not, they go ground and pound a lot of the time. It opens things up. I really think he's better off as more of a game manager, like on Sunday than anything else. But
Strap the whole
we'll
thing
see.
on your shoulders and go win it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. It's always interesting when Sean talks about the type of game he thinks it's going to be. And you asked him about that sort of the line, and he said we try to anticipate that. Obviously, you have to adjust as a game unfolds the way you think or not. But he said, with a team like the Chargers, if you got to matriculate the ball down the field, as they say, then that's the challenge. And the play caller and the quarterback need to know and understand that and be willing to put a 12-play drive together and not go for the home run. And when we've seen the Broncos, like anybody, but Sean in particular, he wants to go for the jugular a lot. And sometimes that pays off big, sometimes it doesn't. But this is a game where it's harder to put together a 12-play drive than it is, when you score 3, obviously. So it'll be interesting. They've got to avoid the penalties. They've been heavily penalized the last 2 games. That's sort of an underrated, I think, element offensively is, if you the drive, one of the 3 drives they failed on in the second half last week.
Adam Troutman face mask.
Yeah.
Brutal.
A false start that they overcame and then a face mask that they couldn't. So that element of the game is you've got to play clean against the Chargers because they're going to make you earn it. So that sort of sizes it up, I think, Luca. Before we go, prediction time.
Shoot, what did I say? The final note there. I think Broncos have very few explosive pass plays so far this year. Yeah. I don't think this is the week to change that. I think, to try to change that. Yep. I would say. I think I said 27-17 Chargers. It just feels, and again, I could sit here and eat my own shorts next week, but
that'd make for good podcasting.
It would, yeah, just live. I think the Chargers to me just feel like they're operating so much more cleanly right now. And when you get those 2 factors on a collision course, it just, it feels like the Broncos are just, pulling a little bit more together right now than LA is. But we'll see. That's my take.
Yeah, I picked 23-17, I think, Chargers. Maybe a little bit closer than that. But no, I have a similar idea of the game as you do, I think. Obviously, it's just, even though it's not the most hostile road environment, it's still on the road in the division. We'll see. We'll see if they can get a win against Harbaugh. He's been really good, obviously. The part of the undercurrent of all that, obviously, is that Harbaugh was, squarely in the mix for the Broncos job a couple of years ago, and then decided to stay at Michigan for ultimately the national championship / Connor Stallions year. And the Broncos hired Sean. So that sort of hangs. There's all of these interpersonal relationships in the division now with Harbaugh and Pete Carroll, obviously old AFC or NFC West rivals, now AFC West rivals. Everybody's sort of chasing Andy, Harbaugh and Sean. There's all these different. It's great. It's great when you have 4 coaches of that caliber in the division.
I think some AFC West team should just hire Connor Stallions on a scout or on a sideline basis, just not tell anyone and then just leave him out there.
If Harbaugh did it would be amazing.
That'd be hilarious.
But yeah, I think there are plenty of routes for Denver to win this game.
Absolutely.
And also, last year they were 0-2 after 2 weeks, but it was I think the vibe was a little bit similar, and you didn't quite know who they were. They hadn't quite pulled it together yet. Obviously, the record was a little different, but they were going down to play a Tampa team that was pretty good, and that especially early in the year, I think, was seen as a big test. They were underdogs, and they just they blew the Bucs' doors off, and so that is in there. That's in the possibility, the mix of possibilities for this game. I don't think that's how it's going to go. I wouldn't be shocked if the Broncos win, but yeah, I've got the Chargers 23-17. We will be in sunny Los Angeles by the time some of you listen to this tomorrow. Saturday, obviously, we'll have all kinds of coverage on Sunday from SoFi Stadium. But even before that, obviously, latest on the injury front, we'll see about don't expect Dre Greenlaw to play. We'll see about Evan Ingram. He hasn't practiced this week either. Back injury seems a little dicey. So we'll see what Sean Payton has to say about that and all the rest this afternoon. DenverPost.com/Broncos for that, for all the coverage from the game, for everything you need on the Broncos beat. That's Luca. I'm Parker. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.